Here's something that probably keeps your accountant up at night, but the wealthy never think twice about it. There's a legal strategy, completely legal, that allows some of the richest people in America to access unlimited cash without ever paying taxes on it. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars moving through their accounts, and the IRS just watches. And the crazy part? Once you understand how it works, you'll realize just how backwards the entire system is designed. This is one of the financial secrets they don't teach in schools. Let me set the stage with something you already know intuitively. When you make money, you pay taxes. When you invest that money and it grows, you pay taxes again when you sell. If you sell your house, you pay taxes. When you pass money to your kids, they pay taxes. It feels like you're being taxed on the same dollar three, four, sometimes five times over. The average person sees this as unavoidable. It's the cost of living, right? Wrong. Wealthy individuals figured out something fundamental about how the tax code is written. It's not written to tax you on money you borrow. Think about that for a second. Loans aren't income. The IRS explicitly doesn't tax borrowed money because it's not considered income, it's a liability. And that's where the entire system cracks open. Now, most people use loans the way they're supposed to be used. You borrow $300,000 to buy a house and you slowly pay it back with after tax dollars. But what if you never paid it back? Not because you're committing fraud, but because you structured your entire financial life around a completely different principle. Let me introduce you to what we'll call the borrow until you die strategy. And that title isn't for sensationalism. It's literally what happens. Here's how it works. You own significant assets, a business that's growing, real estate worth millions, a stock portfolio. The value of these assets is increasing every single year, 8, 10, even 15% annually. Now, traditionally, if you wanted to access that wealth, you'd sell some of it, and that triggers capital gains tax. But here's the loophole. You don't have to sell the assets. You can use them as collateral. Instead of selling $1 million asset and paying over $200,000 in taxes, you borrow $500,000 against it. The interest rate may be 4 or 5%. And here's the critical part. That interest is tax deductible if the loan is structured correctly. So you're taking cash out of your finances without triggering a taxable event. You use that cash to fund your lifestyle, your other investments, or your business. Then, and this is where it gets really interesting, your assets continue to appreciate. That $1 million asset is now worth $1.2 million next year. The loan, still $500,000. Your net worth increased by $200,000 and you haven't paid a single penny in taxes. You just rinse and repeat. New year, assets are worth more, you take out a slightly bigger loan, or you use that loan money to invest in something that appreciates even faster. And when you pass away, this is the final move. Your heirs inherit these assets at a stepped up basis. That's a technical term for a massive tax gift. It means the tax clock resets to zero. The IRS essentially pretends your heirs bought those assets the day you died, after new higher price. All that appreciation that happened during your lifetime, wiped clean, tax-free. And the original loan? Often the estate just settles it by selling a small portion of the appreciated assets, which now have that higher value, meaning there's minimal, if any, tax burden. The person died having borrowed tens of millions of dollars, lived an incredible life, never paid income tax on any of it, and their family's inheritance came with a built-in tax shield. It's a system where debt isn't a burden, but a tool. A world where, for a select few, taxes are purely optional. So you might be thinking, this can't be legal. Where's the catch? Here's what most people don't understand about taxation in America. The tax code isn't designed to prevent wealth. It's designed to tax income. Income is your salary, dividends, capital gains when you sell. But borrowed money, that's a liability. It's money you owe. You can't tax someone for being in debt. That would be absurd. So the wealthy structure their entire lives around this distinction. They own assets, the assets appreciate in value, they borrow against those appreciating assets, and because the loan itself is an income, there's no tax event. Is it aggressive? Absolutely. Is it available to everyone? Not really. Banks won't just lend you $100,000 against a house unless you have significant equity. They won't lend against a business you've only owned for 2 years. They need stability, predictability, and assets that hold value. This strategy works best for people with substantial assets, the perception of stable income, and a long investment timeline. For a billionaire with a $5 billion business, they can borrow billions against it. For someone with $100,000 in stocks, the mechanics are similar, but the lender's requirements are far stricter. And this raises the ethical question nobody wants to touch. Is this fair? The system essentially creates two tax codes, one for people who earn income, where the middle class pays their taxes, and one for people who own assets, where they can borrow against appreciation indefinitely. But before you think this is a magic bullet, let me be crystal clear about the real vulnerabilities. First, the debt is real. You're not avoiding debt, you're deferring it. Eventually, that loan comes due. Either you refinance it or your estate settles it. The debt does not disappear. Second, market risk. This only works if your assets appreciate. What happens if your business value drops 40% in a recession? Now you owe $500,000 on an asset worth only $600,000. You're overleveraged. Lenders will demand repayment or more collateral. Third, interest rates matter. If you're borrowing at 5%, but your assets are only appreciating at 4%, you are actively losing money. The wealth you thought you were building is shrinking. And fourth, this is the one that terrifies financial institutions. If this strategy becomes too common, Congress will close this loophole. We've seen it happen. Tax strategies that worked for decades get legislated away overnight. This isn't a permanent free pass. It's a system that works right now under the current tax code. But systems change. Here's what really matters about understanding this, even if you never use it. It shows you how wealth actually works. The wealthy aren't necessarily smarter or working harder. They're working differently. They're not playing earn money, pay taxes, repeat. They're using the structure of the rules themselves as their wealth building engine. Meanwhile, someone making $100,000 a year pays taxes on every single dollar. They can't borrow their way to wealth because they don't have millions in assets to use as collateral. The system isn't designed for them. This is why wealth psychology matters. It's about understanding the rules of the game you're in and making sure you're playing the right one. Some people will hear this and think, well, that's just how the rich work. Nothing I can do. That's the mindset that keeps people trapped. Others will think, how do I start building assets so I can use this strategy? That's the wealth mentality. And a third group will think, this should be illegal. And they might have a point, but until it is, the question isn't whether it's fair, it's whether you understand it. So what's the takeaway? 1. Wealth at the top isn't built through income, it's built through asset ownership and leverage. 2. The tax code has always been written to favor assets over income. It's not a secret, it's just not taught in school. 3. If you want to build real wealth, you have to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an asset owner. Start asking, how can I own something valuable that appreciates? Maybe it's a business, real estate, or intellectual property. The path forward isn't a 5% raise. It's building assets that compound. The financial system most people learn is incomplete. It teaches you how to be a responsible taxpayer, but not how to be a wealth builder. If you want to understand the actual systems that create generational wealth, the real playbook that the wealthy use, then subscribe right now. We break down these hidden money systems every week, and I guarantee you'll never look at your finances the same way again. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.